VitalHoops is for the culture.
Peace, Jumbo. Welcome to the VitalHoopsPodcast. My name is Fernando Cardenas, aka International XB. I am your host, and this is episode number 54. Today's guest is a hip-hop legend. He's a writer, a graffiti artist, a professional artist, and a painter. He's an original member of the legendary IBM crew of New York City. Our guest is George Morillo, aka Sen-1. Sen-1, peace, my good brother. Welcome to the VitalHoopsPodcast. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor. It's an honor to have you for real, man. I was telling you a little bit offline, but off air, but it's, I think we need to hear your voice, my brother. People like you who are legends of the culture. I see a lot of these, podcasts and things like that call themselves hip hop podcasts, but sometimes they got a bunch of clowns on talking whatever, and definitely the Vital Hoops podcast, hip hop culture is a huge part of it over here. So it's an honor to have you, my brother. I appreciate it.
Again, I appreciate everything you're doing because you're absolutely right. And this is the type of stuff that balances it out with all, especially with the negativity that goes on when the culture was never created that way.
Without a doubt. And then, a lot of people, like to use the term hip hop, but then they're only talking about rap music. They're not talking about
rap industry.
Right, the industry.
Not even our rap.
Definitely, you're right, 100%, man. So let's get right into it, man. Listen, with that being said, I would love for you to define hip hop, for you in your own words. What is hip hop? And talk to me a little bit about how you got into the culture.
I guess those two questions kind of like go together. So do you mind if I put them together?
Man, that'd be perfect.
So for me, it's a blessed situation because I was raised in what they call now the Upper West Side, which is almost like the bottom. At that time, the boundaries wasn't divided the way they are now. As you know, like just colonization, like gentrification is another form of it. When I was born in 1968 on Amsterdam Avenue on 94th Street, 95th Street, 95th Street and 96th Street was the Mecca for what they call Afro-Latin jazz. We like to say Afro-Caribbean, jazz. Sure. So when you talk about like Harlem, this was like all connected. It wasn't really divided, although people would say 110th Street would start Harlem, but we got a Central Park, which leads you there. So it's real, the way it is real. Like as a kid, you just move going uptown, downtown, mostly uptown. That's where you more wanted, more comfortable. Further downtown at that time was more already, there was a class and a race issue more. But anyway, get into that. I just giving you that background because it put me in a unique situation. Like this was like a melting pot, and being at Harlem and the South Bronx, Harlem goes up to, like 125th Street is the Mecca, 138th Street is a little bridge that leads you right to the South Bronx. So I'm just painting this picture how close things actually are and how the culture, and again, what you were saying, lots of times, and that's what the controversy is of who started hip hop, who did this. You can't say one person started hip hop. Like what you could do is say, because the elements existed. So getting into my story, I grew up within the elements as they were beginning and taking form. And then my older brother, Ricky Mujica, was a famous artist. He used to be, he was 7 years older than me. He is 7 years older than me. And he was a graffiti writer. He wrote Side. But he was down with, he's one of the founders of the original Zoo York, the skateboard crew, Andy Kessler. And he's also part of, it was split. This is pre-hip hop. So this is just to give you the picture of how this was forming.
Yeah.
When people get hip hop, by the time it's named hip hop, it's like the birth. But then everything growing up to it is the beginning within the womb, and it's being formulated. And there's times when the baby might not make it, and there's times when it gets stronger, and there's times when it starts to get weaker, and then each generation starts to come in and pump life into it. So that's what ends up happening, is that you start to see these things develop from kids making skateboards out of 2x4 and taking metal wheels off of roller skates and then building their first ramps down in Riverside Park, and then the city bulldozing it, and them building again, and then getting to the suburbs and empty abandoned pools, and the next thing you know, you have the Andy Kesslers, the Puppet Head, the Popbles, my brother. These guys become the best on this coast of skateboarding, and then become legends on that. But Zoo York had a crew next to that was part of it, and it was called Soul Artists. And that's with Ali and them. And he's the one that eventually would sell, under the influence of crack, will sell the name to the company that becomes Zoo York. But anyway, to give you that background, I ended up growing up within that and seeing the park jams when they were early on, pre the blackout of 77. And then so like I said, everything took form. So the culture was more, I would say like Bambaataa from Zulu Nation, because he was part of the Black Spades, the biggest gang in the city at the time. And because he had the muscle and also the influence and the power in the city at the time, the Black Spades did. Bambaataa was able to transform that and say, we're going to rename it Zulu Nation. And they had a big project, low-income housing for the people that don't know, in the Bronx called Bronx River. And that became like the Mecca. And that was like a fortress. And that was all Zulu Nation. It was all hip hop. So because of that foundation, it fueled everything out. And also the culture was like a fraternity at that time. Like people couldn't just get up and say, I'm down. Like everything you did in the streets in that time, you had to earn your way in. If you was going to be a thief, you had to earn your way in. It wasn't like you just went and did things, because there was people regulating the streets. So if you violated, you could violate on some drug dealer's territory, and he was going to come and get you. So it wasn't like you could just do things. The mob also controlled the businesses. So if you go and you rob some and it's a number joint, you know, you're going to come up missing. So the streets were really different back then. And hip hop was like that too. So you couldn't just come out and say, I'm a graffiti writer. Like you had to earn your way. You had to
put in the work.
Yeah, you had to but get down with a crew. That's why everybody had crews. And then those crews had a name. And that's what made people recognize you as part of this culture. So it was like that. It was like a kid fraternity, semi-gangs. They were like, instead of big gangs, they became little crews.
I understand.
That specified in specific elements.
Yeah, no doubt. I appreciate that.
I don't want to get off too much.
No, you're good. You're good. That's dope. I appreciate it. I want to get into the IBM crew, you know what I'm saying? But real quick, let me just, you know, you said something interesting there. You just spoke about the AfroLatin community, and then you corrected and you said the Afro-Caribbean. And I was actually just watching Mario Bausa talking about his music and how they try to categorize it as Afro-Latin jazz, and he was like, nah, our music is Afro-Cuban, it's not Afro-Latin. He's like, we're not Latin.
Yeah, we're not Latin.
And
we're not Hispanic, we're not Latin, we're not Spanish.
How are we gonna be named by the colonizers' language or some shit like that? You know what I'm saying? And I've always had that same argument, you know what I'm saying? Like, we children of the African diaspora, just because we speak Spanish doesn't make us Spanish. You know what I'm saying?
Nah, and we don't even speak. And you know what's interesting, coming from the biggest island, like coming from what's now Dominican Republic, as we know, is Quisqueya originally, right? And Haiti, all that's all one, right? The interesting thing is that when you realize when people really free themselves, like the Haitian Revolution, and not that they just freed themselves, they helped move the earlier movements of many so-called Latin American countries, or South America, you know, Central America, as well as the Dominican Republic, which hates them so much, their own neighbors, not all, obviously. I grew up differently. I grew up with the military being in my family. So I grew up when my family history predates DR. So for me, I don't really even recognize it like that. I see Haiti and DR the same, because my mom used to go, we was all part of it, you know. And anyway, I'll tell you that story. Those stories different. So my history, I'm a little bit more blessed with having like a few hundred years of history in the Caribbean, you know, there, you know, in the family bloodline, and also having the last name Morillo comes from the Moors from southern part of Spain. So we have our own crest and stuff. So it gets deep with me. So I got more knowledge of self. But can I say that's part of the most important element of hip hop? So there's 4 physicals. Can I jump into that real quick?
For sure, man. Please.
I don't want to just, that's why
No. You're good, brother.
People know the 4 elements of hip hop, which is, and like you said, some don't even know that. They think it's just rap, right? So, you know, the oldest obviously would be graffiti, right? That's been around, and it wasn't called graffiti, it was called writing, right? Graffiti is a title given by the media, just like you said with us, with Latin. See the connection, right? Breakdancing wasn't called breakdancing, it was B-boy, B-girl. the media called it breakdance because of the acrobats and like Frosty and them doing the freeze and slamming themselves. The DJing, as we know, and I think that was, people used to just, I don't even know if they would call it DJs. It might have just been disc jockeys or something, because they mimicked a lot off the radio. And then the rappers were MCs, masters of ceremony. They were just the host. They wasn't even that big and important in the beginning. Like they were important because they hyped up everything.
Yeah, but hyping up the crowd and things. Yeah,
and keeping the flow going with the music. It was the DJ, everything, until the crews came out. Like the MC crews, like Grandmaster Caz and them cats, those early cats. They were in Busy Bees and these show people, and a lot of them, if you do the research, like Harlem World and all these early clubs, you see what I'm trying to say about the early hip hop also being in Harlem. So the Bronx gets a lot of credit, but the evolution of the advancement of the culture is definitely this area. So what people fall in love with, and that's why again, what I say makes me lucky to be in this position, because I'm in the middle of all this world, but I'm growing up as a little kid with Frosty Freeze living across the street from me, little Norm Ski from Flashdance living across from me, and we've known each other since, we're brothers to this day. We've known each other since all our lives. We're part of the same community. Ken Swift living a few blocks down. Doe's living a few blocks down. Kel, I mean, I could go on. Zephyr, everything comes out of here. Even the Wild Style graffiti piece for the movie is done on 104th Street in Riverside. What The Warriors is filmed down the block in Riverside Park. So I just grew up in this neighborhood where we don't get a lot of the credit unless you was around, And then, but the elements, real quick. So I said the four physical. The number one most important is knowledge of self. So, and that was always emphasized from the beginning. And that's why you have 5%ers, you have all these crews from that era, have mathematics, have rules, and have it wasn't just to have these numbers and stuff. It had to do with your ancestry and your knowledge of self, so that you could bring that to the culture. Doing moves and doing graffiti and doing writing and doing pieces is hollow if you don't have knowledge of self. You know what I'm saying? That's what you see today.
Yeah, no doubt. I do a lot of activism around hip hop, and I always say that, knowledge is the most important element. You know what I'm saying? Knowledge of self, understanding who you are, no doubt. And then, you know what I'm saying? But definitely that's one thing. A lot of people are not familiar with the elements, and they don't understand that, knowledge, that's hip hop.
And it starts with you. It starts with you just knowing who you are and where you came from. Like what you just spoke about. The fact that we could talk about the Latin thing and all that stuff and be on the same page and have that communication. And I have to argue it. What do you mean? I am Spanish. You speak Spanish. No, you don't. You speak a mixed dialect. Our dialect still has our Arawak language, then Yucca and all those words are not Spanish words.
Absolutely.
So it's like, without that knowledge, you can't have these conversations.
No doubt, man. Yeah. I appreciate that. I like how you were kind of, painting the picture as you speak about everything. So let's get into the incredible bombing masters, the IBM crew, as the crew you're a part of. Can you please just keep on painting that picture? New York City at that time, like you said, you growing up in the Upper West Side, and well, hopefully we all know about, the living conditions of our brothers and sisters, how the oppression was on our people. And can you please keep on painting that picture?
So as you say, the picture was painted was that the city was burned down mostly. And a lot of it had to do with after the Black Renaissance and the Civil Rights Movement, and I hate using black, but that's what it was called. I should say more of the Harlem Renaissance, not the black. I don't use those words. I use melanin to describe our people. Levels of melanin. I don't use the terms like you said, the oppressive terms for us. It don't make no sense. Like I don't say I'm, Hispanic Latin. Like we said, I'm a lighter skinned melanin brother. You know what I mean? That's it.
No doubt.
You know what I mean? So coming up in those conditions was that the city was burnt down and kind of pretty much abandoned in a way, and it was like almost, again, like a restart in a way, because you had a lot of people migrating from the South and also coming in from the Caribbean, and people that were here, like my mother, like my moms, and they were here from the 50s, actually either the early to mid 50s, now that I calculated right. So you had these generations that were actually living kind of nice. And then it began really fast with the Vietnam War and the opium flood, the flood of opium. And that happened with us with crack. And then, like I said, the Civil Rights Movement, you had a lot of people get scared. I hate to say, you know, the high class or Caucasian people, they kind of like fled. They fled, and what they did was, and mainly it was the Jewish community, because they were the ones that controlled a lot of the real estate. They began to burn down the buildings for insurance money. But also, it's also the theory of, like, I see it now, it was also designed this way, because it was like what they're doing now with burning things down, and people think it's just forest fires, and people, you know, there's evidence that is actually being done purposely for this whole new societies that they want to build, the 15-minute cities and all this crap that they got planned. So living this age at 55, I could see it all played back again as a kid living in those conditions. So what they did was, because a lot of the property here was owned by people of color, like Central Park, Seneca Village, if you know the history with that, and how they took that was a whole town. So that was part of it, and we didn't know at the time. So what happens is they use taxpayer money. They end up they burn out half the block, and then the few buildings that are left that are still owned by people of color, or even some poor Caucasian people, they will do eminent domain and take it, and for the purpose of urban renewal, which would become the beginning of gentrification. So urban renewal, they'll start building projects, and they'll say, hey, we're going to build low-income housing, you know, to replace these little tenements that just got burnt down. And then, we'll build these Michelama, it's called Michelama program buildings, which are like low-income, middle-class buildings, but they're like really nice buildings, which I end up moving in, but like 30 floors. So you go from a little tenement to 30-floor building, which we didn't know they had a 30, 40-year plan, in which then they were going to come in and start buying it under our noses, push us out, and then make them into condos, which they are now. And so that's why a big influx of homeless people now, when you had a rise of especially people that look like us moving into the middle class, it was a way of shutting it down. So now in New York, you just have like kind of like a rich class and a very poor class. And the middle class has gotten sucked in, really like struggling to be here, or they're already at the bottom here. And they're already at the bottom. So so that's what was going on at that time. So my neighborhood happened to be the Mecca, again, being born in here is the Mecca of this. So you're in the middle of, like, if you see Carlito's Way, when he's talking about his homeboy that tries to rat him out with the microphone, that's in a wheelchair, when he talks about him prior, he's talking about he's in my neighborhood doing the moves, because you still had rubbles, but you still had nice clubs, and you still had gangsters that were nice. So you got to see like both worlds, right? You got to see poverty to the worst. Like, I was in a tenement with no hot water in the winter, no heat, no nothing, like holes in the floor. But then I moved up to the Michelama one on Columbus, and it's 30 floors. It's smaller, but you have an elevator. You have no guards, no doormen or nothing. You had to fend for yourself, but it was still a brand new building, right? So you got to see those two worlds. So in a way, for us, it was very unique. And that's why this hip hop was the hip hop style that people fell in love with when it hit commercialized. It was what people could relate to, because not only was it diverse, but it also economically, we had Lincoln Center. That's the big Rocksteady battle in Lincoln Center. So what happens is, my neighborhood, gets back to IBM real quick. My neighborhood being the Mecca of this, like I said, we had Doze Green, who's Doze Green now, but Doze, famous graffiti artist who creates the Muggsy character, which is the one underneath this canvas down there. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, so he creates that, but he's down with Ken Swift. Like I said, Frosty lived across the street from me. We had a crew prior in the early 70s called Rock City Crew, which were legends. We had crazy DJs, Louis Louv. So we had everything going on, Red Alert. All of them would come here. We would have jams, park jams. So we growing up, Jazzy J from Zulu Nation, we was connected with Zulu. So everything was happening, right? So Frosty brings Crazy Legs down here, and Crazy Legs goes, you know, at the time, Joe and this other guy they were the prez of Rocksteady. Legs wasn't really like a big deal in Rocksteady, because Rocksteady was like legendary in the Bronx. They had the name, right? And we, as coming up, we admired, like, we was Rocksteady. Also young, so we admired all the, no matter, and because we was tied with Zulu, we admired these crews too. So we had a crew called, I didn't, but Ken Swift and them, and I grew up with them. Ken Swift, Frosty, and a whole bunch of cats had Kippy D, rest in peace. A whole bunch of them had a crew called Young City Boys, or Young City, they would call it, and Muggsy Nation, which is the character. Then Frosty brings Legs down here. Legs gets blown away. because they were so advanced, and we had the graffiti lockdown, and IBM comes out of that. So IBM comes out of Doze Green and Ken Swift create. Because every breakdance, every b-boy was a writer. Everybody almost was a writer at that time. It didn't mean that you pieced, but everybody wrote. That was just a part of the streets, right? So even the girls got down, like Baby Love, Daisy, that's in Hey You Rocksteady Crew, was in my class at 12 years old. Her brother I grew up with. So in a building I would live in later, they lived in there. So that's just to show you how close we all was. So then what happens is that Legs goes back and says in the Bronx and says, yo, I want to create a Manhattan chapter. And they kind of like, it's controversial. I don't know about that part, but I know that in middle school, I hook up with Polk, 12 years old, in junior high school. I hook up with Polk, who's a graffiti writer, who's being groomed. He's from the projects further up, which I'm not technically supposed to go because it's boundaries. 96th Street is a boundary. You can't really pass. There's those communities, this community, and then they always have friction. But because they came to school in my neighborhood, and it was a big school, junior high school, a lot of people blend from different neighborhoods. So then you got to be able to go in their neighborhoods. So Polk was being groomed by a lot of the older writers. So, and he was nasty at a young age because he was being groomed early. I was a writer earlier, but not serious like that. I got down with a crew called the Fresh Five in like 1979. It was more of a breakdancing. Breakdancing was really the hot thing, and DJ. Like that was really it.
So you were a b-boy. You were a b-boy before, right?
Nah, I didn't have the rhythm. I knew the steps like to get down. My brother guy was really nice. And then, but anyway, to get back to IBM, as I'm in middle school, Polk gets the first crew called MOS, Masters of Style. And then because we was all together as a crew, that's the first crew we got. But it was legitimate. It was being passed down by Kippy D because they were starting now to move in to the breakdancing fame. It was starting to catch on with like 5-5 Freddy in the downtown scene and like what would become Wild Style later. But that earlier scene is breakdancing. The clubs are paying B-boys to come in and do their thing. So it's also the hustle, is more. So a lot of the writers start gravitating to that, like Doze. They start gravitating more to the breakdancing. Madonna's into it, all these people. That's when Madonna was like a punk rocker in the Lower East Side. But so in the clubs and they were getting older, so that's the life they want to live. So I grew up in that. So then IBM, as we rock MOS, Doze moves on to becoming more of a breakdancer. He passes IBM down to Polk. IBM was legendary already. I mean, you had Lady Pink, you had Mayor, you had like every top writer, Fable, who used to write, Pop Master Fable, used to write Pacer. All of them were part of IBM's legacy prior to us. You had the TC5, and then it was connected to TC5. So IBM was like, it was a real high-ranking crew. It wasn't like no mediocre. So passing it down to a group of 12, 13-year-olds, you could imagine the props we had. We probably the youngest, and then it was given to us completely. It's not like, and then Polk was so nasty, he just ran with it. And our style goes, every crew leaves a legacy of a style. And some of them mix according to the neighborhood. So our style is like a TC5, IBM style, and then now FC, because we brought FC in, which is first class with West and them. They come in later. So it continues, but that's the style we kind of like have. Anyway, sorry, I could keep going.
Nah, man, it's all
My
good.
brain starts to feed me crazy
This is
stuff.
great. This is great, man. You're giving a lot of knowledge, a lot of history, man. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the listeners definitely gonna have to go back on this one and check it out a couple times. I'm gonna check it out and love it. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks.
You said this, man. I'm gonna read a quote. You said, "I don't just throw paint around in the name of art. Every spray, stroke, drop, and drip is a political statement." Can you please elaborate on that, man? Because I think that's so important.
It goes on two folds. It goes into our history of who we are, right? And where we come from. We're the children of, especially in the Caribbean, the first to be colonized, the first to be enslaved, the first to have everything done to us. We're the first to greet outsiders and show them love and expose them to everything we had. We didn't own anything. We didn't claim anything. We gave everything. So everything that we do, so for me, like for my responsibility, is that I got to make sure that everything I do is in that responsibility of representing that struggle of our ancestors and who I am. And that goes with the knowledge of self. So then getting into it. So that's for me, right? To make sure that I'm always in that line. Mm-hmm. Hip hop is a seed of those rebellious children. I always say hip hop is the bastard child of the civil rights movement. Hip hop was a movement. People don't understand that. What it was the only Black Lives Matter is not an organic movement. Like people got to get their minds. Protesting against the government is not organic movements. Those are substitutes that the government has put in place to allow you to burn out steam and not do anything. Nothing comes out of it. It's just really
not organized. Yeah, not organized or nothing. Just
so coming out of, like I said, the Black Panthers, coming out of Harlem having Malcolm X, my neighborhood had Panthers, coming out of eating their breakfast programs and lunch programs, because we didn't have any of that, coming out of the housing issues that were developed out of their struggle. We knew from the 60s and 70s, children going up to the early 80s, pre-crack, we knew what struggle was. We knew we was together, even if we fought each other. And that's why hip hop becomes, from the beginning, is a cultural revolutionary movement. It's probably one of the greatest movements ever in the history of modern day, because it was created by kids with imagination. It wasn't controlled by ideology or politics. It didn't care about this system that we lived in. We created our own imagination of life, how we wanted to dress, how we wanted to talk, how we wanted to see things, how we wanted to interact, how we wanted to deal with conflict, how we wanted to make our own economics. Had nothing to do with the system, had nothing with paying taxes, with voting. We didn't care about none of that. We living in rubbles. We care about one another, interaction. So when I say what I said in that statement, it's just from those seeds alone. The fact that I do, and I keep it to the truth of myself, and to not just hip hop, but to the cultures that fed hip hop, that comes from us, is what comes out of me, is my soul. Every time I do something, my soul is in it. And if my soul is not really in it, I don't do it. I mean, even if I'm doing gallery work and there's a balance there, I have to still incorporate who I am somehow. When I do the American flag series, it's not that I'm patriotic, right? I mean, to some degree, you can be, because it is the country I'm born in, right? So at the end of the day, you can't really, there's a lot to love and there's a lot to hate. I understand that what I don't like and what I do like. I do like a country like this for a lot of reasons, but I dislike everybody that runs the government. I don't care what party, right? And the people that are still trying to keep the control and manipulation and lies. So it's not that you hate.
And on a global level.
On a global level, because you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's not that you hate where you're from, but you hate the power structure. Absolutely. So you have to find like a balance in that. So hip hop comes out of that cry of kids. It was never meant for the outside world. It was for us. And then the outside world got it. And to this day, it's changed the entire planet. I mean, I think of what crack did and wiped out so many. And I always, when I travel around the world, I smile, because I tend to say, man, we won. We literally won. Like coming out of the ghettos of the burnt New York City, we changed the entire planet. And I tell that to young people. I tell them all the time. I'm like, do you understand the power? Like, not only did we change, the whole planet dresses like us, talks like us, every music, every song incorporates us. All the modern art today, look at the street art, all the offspring. Everything, all the dance, the Olympics using break dance, everybody is now like dancing to our tune. But not only that, you talking about poor kids that sometimes they have nothing to eat. Like we had to eat bread with mayonnaise and stuff just to live, right? Or eat at friends' houses, or go to get free breakfast lunches at school and breakfast and stuff in the mornings, meet up like little rascals just to get food and run around the neighborhood and rob delivery guys and eat together. We had to do all kinds of stuff to create trillion-dollar industries that now not only feed people around the world, right, and give careers, but also change technology. All the technology right now is kind of like catered to our culture, because it has to speak to our culture. So when you think of that, it's like, it's mind-boggling to me. And then the fact that it came back full circle for me, and I'm able to be 55 years old with no education, never passed the 10th grade, never did anything, and I'm hanging with Picassos and murals and stuff. And I'm in a gallery, one of the finest galleries in the country, if not probably part of the world. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, that's crazy,
No doubt.
Sorry.
No
Yeah,
doubt.
like,
Nah, yeah, I feel you. I feel you, man, and I appreciate that. Yeah. I want to get a little bit into graffiti, because I know that I'm not a graffiti artist myself, but some of the guys on my crew are definitely, and so I know even in Cuba, one of my good brothers, Kadir, he's a graffiti artist. Shout out to him, Kadir, Guerrilla Republic, Cuba. He has a lot of problems with the authorities. Let's just say it that way.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I know every graffiti artist knows that. Every true graffiti artist knows about that. But I'm
That's
sure,
part of the game.
yeah. But I'm sure, like many things, it was probably a lot worse. Like back in your day, I know that the oppression was heavy. The police department, especially NYPD and all that, was on you. I know you were wanted at some point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I can talk about that.
Yeah. Can you please talk to me a little bit about that? Yeah.
So again, there's transitions that happens when the neighborhoods are burnt down and things are written out. Nobody really cares. You then the pressure comes from within your own community. It comes from you either going over somebody by mistake or somebody just didn't like that you wrote on some and you have to deal with that. The cops wasn't really as much of an issue when things were burnt down and abandoned and you lived in tenements. That wasn't they barely came in our communities. Our communities regulated themselves. We had our own issues with that. And then stealing the stuff. We were so poor and stealing like spray paint and stuff like that was really hard, especially in this neighborhood. And I come from a family that was pretty much prestige in the Caribbean, then here become obviously nothing in a way, right? Especially my mother being darker than I am and being a single mother as well. But anyway, so in the beginning, it wasn't bad like that. And when that wanted poster came out, what happened was I was hitting projects. I didn't live in projects, but we hung out in projects all the time. We had this neighborhood was so diverse that we could have what are now Central Park West, like these nice buildings, older buildings with old money. But at the time, people were really struggling, even if they had money, the ones that stood. So you would have friends that lived in there. It wasn't as segregated as it is now. Now things are separated, like you got Columbia Prep. So anyway, you go into these places and you could take tags. So the stuff you had to deal with is like, everybody knew each other. And if like you bombed up somebody's building and the superintendent was like somebody that's, was around those people, he's going to try to bust you up when he catches you or pull you by the ear and make you clean it. So that was the first step. When I got that wanted poster, I was 12 years old, and it was issued by the housing authority because I began to hit the projects. And what we did as IBM cats, we used to, not just IBM, I think that predates, that was maybe early IBM or I think that might have been under Masters of Style when that happened. But we used to make mops, which we call mops, homemade markers. And I have some here, actually. It's funny. But this is also like a shoe polish one. Oh, it's broken.
Right.
But this is like a shoe polish one. So we would take things from, like, broke it. The ink ate it up. These are not the originals. These are the cheap ones they sell now. But we'll get like the roll-ons and stuff and make our own markers, and then we'll fill it with, there was a purple ink like this one's mimicking called supermarket ink. You steal it from the supermarkets. It was from stamping the food with the prices. You have it?
Nah. What I got one of these new things. I got one of these.
The crinks,
small.
Yeah. And then we had these, which were the unis and the minis. I never liked using this because my name, the S's and the E's. But these wasn't homemade, but these you could buy.
Okay.
These came back from the 70s, and this is a uni and a mini and a mini. And anyway, we used to steal the school erasers and make these markers out of like the old roll-ons, and we used to alter like the pilots markers. They had Magnum 44s, I think they were, and we could take out the tip and put erase in it and make mops. So when you used to bomb with supermarket ink, didn't come off. Like that purple ink to stamp the groceries was this special ink. Like if you got it in your hands, it stood there for like a week. Wow. Like you couldn't scrub it off. It went in. So the same thing when you tagged on a wall, it was you couldn't paint over it. It would come right through. The only way you could go over it is, it didn't matter how much layers. It was a purple ink. It was rich. It would seep through. So you had to like paint over it with metallic, like spray paint or something, and then paint over it. So if you bomb somebody's building like that, and the super's trying to go over it, and he's already put 20 coats on it, he's gonna want to kill you. You know what I mean? He's like, so that's the stuff we was doing. So the fact that I was hitting the projects with mops that were leaking through, and then somebody ratted me out and gave him my real name.
That's how they got your name. Yeah.
So that's how it wasn't just me, it was the crew of us. But for some reason, my name came out, and then they put it up there as Graffiti George everywhere, and they didn't use Sen, so I wouldn't get because at that time it was really your alias. Nobody, you couldn't let nobody know. Only your
government. Nobody's your government.
Yeah, like your moms didn't know you was Sen. You crazy? She's gonna break your head. She sees your tag everywhere. Like nobody. You was against the world, so it was really a secret identity, and that's where it comes from. So when they put that up, we actually, the whole crew, we went around ripping them down, and I was nervous because I was 12 years old, and I'm like, that looks serious, you know. And now I look at it as funny, but back then you like, oh man, like not only are you gonna get in trouble by the system, but if your mother finds out, my mother was really Caribbean, brutal. You already know, brutal, man. She wasn't playing. I was gonna get some scars from that one. So we ripped them down, and it just happened to be, you know, you're 12, you're not thinking about it. It happened to be that that's the last one that I kept, and I had it folded in my pocket, right? And then eventually I put it on my wall, my door. And then years later, like if you look at it now, there's like tags on it, West tagged on it, like years later, because it was just hanging on my door as a wanted poster and never cared about it. Now it's in a frame and I keep it. But funny, fast forward to now, like about less than 10 years ago, a kid from Brooklyn sent me a picture. He's a photographer. He sent me a picture. They had made metal ones now, so they still issued it. They don't know. They don't know it's me. It's just a new administrations, and they just, I guess, seen in the file. But now they created one. It's like the poster boys and girls. They made George and Georgina graffiti, and they got it in metal plaques. I was trying to get one, but it's bolted to the wall, and I'm like past those days. But it's crazy, man, to think of that you know, how innocent in a way it was still like, you know. And then the one more thing on that poster was funny about it is like to show you how the system at that time that's considered a big deal, because you didn't get charged for everything like today. Like everything wasn't so serious, right? Even robbery, like it wasn't, like it depends to what degree, right? And so you didn't get time for everything. You got put in juvenile detentions. You went through, it was different processes, right? On the poster it says reward is cleaner buildings.
I saw that.
That's all, you know, like they tell them it's not no money, and it's telling the residents, like if we catch them or you bring them forward, the reward is your building's gonna be clean. So that kind of tells you that we was catching wreck.
No doubt. That's funny, man.
Oh, one more thing on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We'll get into the question with that. It would change though. When Koch became mayor, he was like the first Giuliani. He was a Gestapo. He was part of the whole gentrification. And and if you see Star Wars, and I'm sure you have, that's a documentary by PBS which covers both sides of especially the graffiti and the system. It's a really good documentary at the time because it didn't have a bias, and it was PBS at the time before it was bought in, you know, and controlled like today's media. It was free media at that time. So they did a really good two-sided piece with that, and it's called Star Wars for your listeners. But in there, Koch, when he comes in, he classifies us as public enemy number one. And before you could gentrify a city, he says it in there. He's like, before you could, you know, gentrify and clean up, you have to get rid of the graffiti, the writers, because it shows that society has lost control. So just to flip into our historical struggle, as you know, coming from even Cuba and me coming from, it's always been a tactic in movements to leave messages on the walls for whatever's happening and updates and different things. So again, fast forward to us, we in a movement that we don't know we in a movement. We just acting on DNA memory, acting on cultural memory, and acting in our living situation. And yet we're doing the same patterns that our people did before to liberate or to fight the systems that they were in of oppression. And here we are. But now we start to develop a style with it. You know what I mean? So what happens to it, it goes from being messages to being styles. And one more thing, it wasn't meant for the outside. We used to write so that if you wasn't a writer, you couldn't read it. You couldn't understand it. So the whole concept of wild style after, what's his name? Tracy creates his little thing. But for us in the inner city, really poor ghettos, Wild style, to us, our message was, for him, it was just being wild. For us, it was because we use slang and pigland to talk behind people and they wouldn't know what we were saying. Wild style became a style in which you couldn't read it if you wasn't a part of our world. Because it was growing too fast. And it was a way of saying, you know what, if you ain't down, you're not going to be able to read this. It became, again, going to our ancestors' DNA. Now we're using a system of communication in which it's not meant for the outside. It's meant for us. And of course, with the movie, it blows up and it changes. And with fame and money and industry, everything changed. But the roots of it was really like the grassroots movement. It wasn't like what people think it is today at all. It was a survival thing. It was for our survival. Economically, you know, every element makes money, you know, pennies. But for us, it was better than, it survived you from robbing or committing crime. You was able to break dance in the street, have enough money for your crew to eat and hang out. The DJs did the little jams, charged $2, $3, $1 at the door, and you made your money. You didn't have to commit crimes. So it was a survival deal. The MCs got their little piece. The graffiti writers got the flyers and the clothing. And so everything, it was our way of just taking care of ourselves. The battling comes to curb the fighting, the violence. So every element had a battle. So you could deal with your conflict outside of physical violence. So it was genius. It was genius. If you think about the roots of it. I mean, I wish people adapted today as a movement the way it was back then. I think that they'll see the power in that. It's amazing. Plus the physicalness, you know, you stay in shape.
Exactly, for sure. Yeah. That's an important part of it, man. No doubt. Health, man. Health. We got
health.
For sure. But I appreciate that answer, man. Listen, kind of a segue to my next question, which is about, you know, I think what today's mainstream hip hop has kind of lost is originality. You know what I'm saying? Originality.
Yes.
And like you said before, back in the day, if you wasn't original, you just wasn't in it. You wasn't part of it. They would call you whack. You weren't like it wasn't gonna happen, right?
Graffiti writer get tag toy is over for you.
No doubt. Exactly. So talk to me a little bit about the importance of originality, but also how, because my son is 8, right? And he really likes graffiti. He started off drawing, like when he was really little, he can draw very well. And now he's starting to get into graffiti writing and things. He really likes it. So I tell him how the importance of originality, you know. So can you please talk a little bit about that? And also, how did you develop, you know what I'm saying, your own style?
For me, from my personal experience, but style was always important. But again, within our world was funny because in those eras, because things were legacy being passed down. Remember, by the time I come, I'm part of when I hit the trains in, I think it was 82, I'm about 13 years old, 12, 13 years old. But we was already motion bombing, which meant, but I'm talking about peace, an actual piece. That's a whole different animal in those days. Like doing a graffiti mural piece on a train, that was the ultimate. First of all, you couldn't even get in those territories, and get in those tunnels were the most dangerous things in the world. And they were controlled by gangs, real gangs, powerful gangs in those neighborhoods. And if you got caught down there, it was a wrap. You was done. Like nobody will see you ever again. And those are the days when people didn't just kill people, they took them and disappeared them. Like it wasn't just, this is a different era. It wasn't a game. But we was wild kids. We was like wild little animals, and we ran in packs, and we got hurt a lot. We got beat up a lot by older people. We had to beat up transit cops. So getting to your question, styles, right? For me, I would say, I think I bear more of a witness because I was the type of kid that, because of my brother, I was around a lot of things very early. And because my mother was like that too, it was like a free spirit. I was hyper. You could probably still see that with me now. I will bounce from things. I didn't have the focus unless I was in my own head to really put in the work that I should. So my credit when answering your question, like I was kind of like more blessed of being in the right place at the right time and getting up with Polk, who's like the master. I mean, he was one of the best at that time. And he influenced a lot. Too bad he went down the route he went and threw it all away. But at those days, not only did he know how to coordinate a good crew, even though his tactics later would show that he was a little too much in his own head, power-wise. and just ends up, when that happens, you end up destroying everything you put together, you know. And I witnessed that even in the gang life. Too much power, the cold, the personality, you know about stuff like that. It's toxic. But early on when we was kids, so I was blessed enough to, when I really got into it and got pulled in, I was pulled in by cats that were wicked, and the style was already presented to me within the crew. So I basically played with that. But my story changes because I grew into my neighborhood gang, which was an outlaw gang from '74, which from going from crews is child play. Graffiti at that time was kid stuff. Like the drugs were coming in, the going to clubs, the fighting. That's what made your name in the streets. The graph was, and even breakdancing was starting to, like, everything, all of that stuff was like considered like child's play. It wasn't like nothing anymore. Once you get to high school, it was already like, that's something you did when you was 10, 12, 13 years old, junior high school. But once you got to high school, now the game changes. Now you got to get flyer. Now you got to be out there, put your name on the streets, get that respect. So you didn't really do that stuff, and you had to be clean and fresh. So, and none of the elements, except for the DJ and the MCing, kept you clean and fresh. Plus, graffiti was hip hop's bad seed. We was the criminal element. Everything about hip hop, about graffiti was criminal. Everything from beginning to end. You know what I mean? There was nothing about it. The other elements, you know, if you had your equipment, you basically just had to make sure you were safe, protected from people trying to rob you and stick you up. You know, but the other elements, you wasn't breaking into stuff. You wasn't being chased all the time. You wasn't hiding in trains. You wasn't fighting wars over tunnels and stabbing people and robbing people. And we was stick-up kids. So we was different. Like that part. And then on top of that, we was hip hop's advertisement. Because before the world really knew, because they couldn't, like you say, outsiders from other countries would visit New York, they couldn't go into the neighborhoods. And there was no other way of seeing this unless you was allowed in, right? Like you met, like 5'5" Freddy brings in Blondie and brings in, you know, different people. That's different. But early on, nobody knew this existed. But then the trains were rolling. You get the full Dondies. You get these full train masterpieces, you know, that were incredible. And then they have messages like Hand of Doom and the war one, I think Lee did with the graveyards and stuff, and Stop the War, and F. Koch. There was one that's, you know, so people would see these coming in, but didn't know that it was part of a bigger culture. But the graph was the advertisement. That's what had people going, wow, that's amazing. And that bothered the system because Koch was selling it as we was this major destruction of the city, right? So he was showing the tags inside that was, the trains were completely bombed out, and the throw-ups. We didn't do throw-ups back then because we thought that was toy. We thought that was part of what the system was using to discredit the ones that were taking time out to create the styles you're talking about, to take time and do 3Ds and learn, you know, shadows. Remember, we teaching each other and learning from comic books. This is not being taught to us like in school. This is an art form where you taking from everything and you're trying to figure it out and piece it all together. So we taking the time to do that, and then somebody comes and does some bubble letter on a train, you know, for the sake of getting up. That just gave the system an excuse to say, you see, look what they're doing. They just destroying stuff. But when they saw masterpieces and letter styles and 3Ds and characters, it made people go, they going to work on these dirty trains that are filthy and they stink and they're hot. And they see this beautiful stuff rolling on Monday morning when they going to work, and it's full colors blasting at them, you know, top to bottoms and everything. And that's what we saw. That made them go, ooh, this is kind of nice. And Koch couldn't deal with that. So he put them through this system called acid washing. So it constantly acid washing, but it wouldn't clean the train. It would melt the paint and made the paint and made the trains rusty and ugly. So, and then that was his excuse to say, but getting back to the style thing, me, by the time I hit like 15, I already grew up with this gang that was really powerful, and they were in the middle of wars. So I had to leave the graph thing. I grew up pretty quick, put it like that. I grew up too fast. Like by the time they were still, cats were still getting down with poking them in the tunnels, I was in the streets moving on to a gangster life and doing things, different things. That was nothing to me. That was like, even the beef they had was like nothing. I was developing differently and getting myself in different type of troubles. And then they would get more in trouble because of drugs and then stick-ups and stuff and then go to jail. Me, it became more organized. The gangs back then were more like mafias. They were more like families. So, and then it was heavy wars going on. So it was different for me. So I didn't develop, just to clarify your question, me, and that's why I always rep everybody. My style basically passed over to me. And it has my little flavor to it, but the credit goes to like the Dozes, the Scenes, the Poke, and them that fed me my style.
Yeah. No doubt. Appreciate that. I want to talk about a little bit about, the elements of the culture. At some point, they were kind of split apart, and basically, I feel like it was, part of it was the industry and the industry tactic, right? To just keep the rappers or the MCing part, call it rap, and just be able to control it, easier to control, and to, to the point where today you see people who are graffiti artists, but they don't even make the connection with hip hop. They're not even connected to the culture, or even people who dance. That's it. They know they do hip hop dancing, but they're not really connected to everything about the culture. Like we said, the knowledge and everything.
So from the historical perspective, it started off that way. The elements were never together to begin with. Graph, everything was developing on its own. And the outlaw gangs, which if you watch, like even like Warriors, which is a commercial movie, but I think there's 30 Blocks from Tiffany's. There's a whole bunch of documentaries of the outlaw gangs of the 70s that came out of the 60s after the civil rights movement was destroyed by, the political organization was destroyed by the government with counterintelligence program. And that's one of the voids that was left. So I think when you talk about writing on stuff, that goes back to the first people, like anybody.
Of course,
like all our cultures.
Hieroglyphics,
all our symbols, the Arawak symbols that you see everywhere in the South, everything, pyramids, whatever. So that's always a form of, that's just the language, right, that we speak. Like music really is language that we speak, right? Frequencies and stuff. It's all been dumbed down. But and if it was me, if I could redefine hip hop, there'll be other elements. Skateboarding would definitely be an element. Double Dutch would be an element, right? The girls that throwing the jump ropes, they would jump in and they were doing rhymes when they were doing it. And we had snapping rhymes. We have rhymes like we used to say, we used to be, and this is little kids, this is in preschool, your mother don't wear no drawers, a ding dong. Like you would say that, and the other crowd would say ding dong. And I saw when she threw them off, ding dong. She threw them in the sky, a ding dong. Superman refused to fly. So we grew up with this stuff around us, but it wasn't hip hop. It was just the way we communicated as people in the ghetto, right? And I'm sure you can relate to that from the islands, because that islands, it's all dance and music and movement, and from the morning to night.
Community.
It's community. It's the way we feed is energy, right? So that's the way it was in the beginning. It wasn't defined. And what happens is the outlaw gangs play a big role in hip hop, and people don't give them the credit. And again, like I said, from it going from the Black Spades, which is considered an outlaw gang, which is an outlaw gang, like the Savage Skulls, like the ones that were around here was the Sandmans, and then it would be developed La West Side Familia out of a bigger gang out of Brooklyn called La Familia, right? But anyway, these gangs protected neighborhoods, communities, but they mimicked the Hells Angels type, right? So they were dirty, they were crazy, they were completely crazy, completely mad. The guys and the girls. The girls would break your jaw like in a second. Like they were no joke. Like this, you feared them and you respected them, and you had to. It wasn't a choice. That's just the way. And our parents feared them. Like you wouldn't go down that street. Like stay away, right? So anyway, they used to put the letters on their jackets, all the symbols. They used to draw. If you look at the old outlaw stuff, and it's all over Instagram too. They posting it a lot. And you see the jackets, the cut off sleeves. So that's what we're looking at as little kids, right? They wearing bell bottom pants, and they putting leather straps in them and different. They wearing spurs like cowboys. They wearing spikes for their hands to fight. They wearing motorcycle chains. So that starts to give us that whole fashion of hip hop. So the when we start doing the letters of our crews, it's based on the outlaws with the old English and stuff. And they will have all kinds of symbolism, and they will hand draw them because they didn't have the stuff to iron. We was able to iron them on at that point, right? So we got that from them. Breakdancing was known as breakdancing. The original up rocking was a war dance they would do. They would get drunk and mimic their their, like West Side Story, they will mimic their rumbles. Because at that time, it's like they would coordinate rumbles and fights. Even when I got down with the gang I got down with, they had war councils and they will coordinate who's gonna fight who, what was gonna be used, what, you know, depending on how serious the beef was. So in that war dance, they will mimic whether it was stabbing or blocking, fighting, but it was also a way they practiced. There was a Brooklyn one that was called, it didn't make it into hip hop, 50 Hands, something like that, where cats would be fighting like this and slapping their hands, and you wouldn't see, and hitting the floor, you wouldn't see where the punch would come from. Because by the time they threw the punch, you was so confused, and it was called like 50 hand slap or something like that. And then we would slap box. So a lot of that starts to mimic. Then what happens is my generation, we start watching the karate movies. 42nd Street had all the Kung Fu movies. And then at 3 o'clock every Saturday till 5 o'clock, we only had 4 channels on the TV. So we didn't spend our times watching TV. But on Saturdays, everybody would run upstairs, all the guys, to watch these karate movies. And Jackie Chan, like the Drunken Masters, all that. So that began to influence the down rock, the floor rock, where they started calling it. So like Ken Swift, when he does that, he's mimicking Bruce Lee. Frosty mimicked the Jackie Chan and Drunken Master. That's why Frosty would actually do the move and fall back and do the flips and land on his back and slam. So remember, we young, and so everything is influencing us. So that's what begins to influence that part. The MCs are being influenced by like Wolfman Jack and these radio celebrities that were real characteristics on the radio, and they changed their voice and they will do all this. So little by little, that's how it starts to formulate. But everything was kind of like separated until, like I said, Bambaataa, to me, like as I remember, was the one that eventually just said, not, and that means all the elements were there. He just brought it in and said, these 4 elements are going to was hip hop, you know, and hip hop was already being used. Again, it's not one person. It's just he being in the position he's in, and it's already happening naturally. It just happens to be the one that actually just says it. Right. But other than that, it's already coming all together. Like I said, Zoo York, skateboarders, and then they have a graffiti crew on the side. But getting back to one thing, a lot of the writers, older writers that say they're not down, that it's not part of hip hop, right? They're right. When they were doing it, like you get the older scene and you get those older cats, it wasn't hip hop. They were living in isolated communities too, like further up that were segregated. They were like Italian neighborhoods and stuff. So they were writing and they were listening to rock music. And some of the trains, even Shadow, Spike Lee's brother, he would do this is pre-hip hop. He was doing, we didn't have records, we didn't have songs. He would put up tags and pieces with like rock songs and themes, because that's what they were listening to. So for them, it wasn't hip hop. It doesn't become hip hop to us. Now, getting back to, I'm sorry, I drifted off a little bit, but getting back to what you're saying about the industry, it kind of like happens because each element could stand alone, but it's more power when they're all together. So the industry, after the crack epidemic, or during the crack epidemic, and then the heroin epidemic came back through that, most of us was wiped out. Like entire communities were wiped out completely. People have no clue of how that was. Forget about COVID. Forget about that. Between that and AIDS were probably the 2 biggest, but crack was Night of the Living Dead like this. From one day to the next, your entire community was monsters. Like it was changed. Like people you grew up with, now you don't even have an ounce of love for them in their heart, because now there's something else. There's something that needs to be taken out because it was just too violent, too crazy, too out of control, totally out of control, right? So we lose all of that stuff of hip hop, innocence. And then most of us, in order to survive, kilos of coke was coming in and pure. And you can make money as a middleman. You didn't have to be in the streets. You get a kilo and then you move it to somebody else and you make 2,000 right there. That's more money that you ever seen in your whole family ever seen. So if you sell 2 or 3 of those a week, you making $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 just from your friends coming over and saying, yo, I got 10 bricks. This is what they are. Oh, word? Yo, I got these bricks. And then somebody that you just passing them on. There's no risk, no nothing. But then, like I said, the crack comes in. So the hip hop leaves all that. It becomes child play. Like I said, you move into gangs, you move into drugs, the money, the cars, a whole new culture comes in. That's where people start to see that culture. And then the rap industry capitalizes off of that, because then the rappers were already, the drug dealers since the late 70s with Supreme and all those cats, they were already hiring rappers to perform for them. So there was always a close close connection. The earlier record labels are all funded with drug money, all of it. So the connection and the industry is mobsters. So the connection with crime, or organized and unorganized, and the music industry was always there. So once they chose rap was becoming that, the other elements didn't mean nothing. It wasn't lucrative like that. And it wasn't as powerful as that. The industry took and separated, and so did the artists. The artists don't see a need anymore to have break dancers on the stage with them. They don't see themselves even having a crew. You know, look at Wu-Tang, was like one of the, I want to say one of the last, but as for 9 members, it's one of the last. You know what I mean? So, and we saw that with all musics. If you think about it, the earlier music, like what we come up with, the AfroLatin jazz, and all, full band orchestras. And then later on, like right now, you get one singer and producers, and then you hire whoever to play instruments while you're performing, backup singers, but they're not your permanent group. They're not the people. So again, back to your question, that's what kills the evolution of anything and the styles. Because what happens is now you're doing it for money and it's not organic. How can it grow? It can't grow. You already met your, I mean, if your goal is to make millions of dollars, once you make it, what's driving you? Like for us, it was our survival, it was our voice. It was the only thing, you know, people say to me, how you guys just do these big trains and stand on the third rail? And we could barely reach them. When I first did our first train, me and Pope got in the tunnel and we looked at each other, older kids took us, and we saw these trains, and now they're not on the platform, they're in the tracks. So we barely passing the wheel. And we looking at each other like, how are we gonna, this thing's a monsters. These are like literally like elephants. How are you gonna climb up here and do this piece now that we're here? So people always said that to me, and I say 2 things. We had the ability for imagination as kids. Sky's the limit. We didn't believe anything was impossible to do. And because of that, makes you very dangerous as a young kid. But also, we really saw ourselves as not living to the next day, you know, for many reasons in the city. So for us, it was like, we have to leave our mark. Like, if we die tomorrow, you're gonna know I was here. So you would take these risks in order to like every piece was your last piece. Like that was your last word to the world. Like that's the intensity. You don't have that today. And that's where the creativity, if you're gonna make it your last word, you're gonna constantly make your last word better than the last. They don't have that today. They get comfortable, whatever sells, whatever moves, stick to that format. The intensity is not there as that type of message. You know what I mean? It's lacking that. Their message is about money, you know, and that kills the spirit. People don't understand that money is not really what it seems to be, you know? Sorry.
Absolutely. Nah, man, that was great, man. I like how you keep going back to imagination. You know, you talk a lot about imagination. I want to read a quote from another hip hop legend, you know, Wise Intelligent.
Yes. That's my boy.
The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. You know, the true sign of intelligence, imagination. And I think that's key, man. And, you know, that's also how the system kind of keeps on controlling us and oppressing us, because a lot of people are not able to see a world in which we're truly free, a world in which we can thrive, you know, as people. So I think that's the same thing, and it goes with art as well, you know.
Well, and again, see, he practiced the original hip hop. He's somebody that I had the pleasure to actually physically meet. I've always known about him and loved his group from day one. He was the type of artist that I got cassettes of his from when they first dropped it. I'm one of the cats that was into that because I grew up with it. But and plus they just wicked. Like their music is
no doubt
totally underrated. Woo, man. Woo. And I was in the streets at that time. I was on some gangster stuff, but still having that in my root. But what he's, you know, building up on what he's saying, like nowadays, everybody's picking up on our old ways, like, and some people don't understand the power of it. We do, because we spiritual people, and we have entities, and where we come from, we have entities. You know, Elegua, Chango. We have different, the water, everything, the sun, everything has an entity that. So we understand a spiritual level that other people might not be able to understand, or they take it as for surface as a trend. They think but manifestation comes from the imagination. And you could, at this point, people don't realize that they could basically manifest anything, but you got to let it go. You can't be in this system's box. These societies were designed for this reason. We come from people from nature that didn't have these boundaries. And when we don't have these boundaries, we connect to every sound, every animal, every insect that moves, the plants. That's the universe. Here in these cities are not the universe. These are man-made experiments to keep us from exercising that energy and exercising that imagination. It suppresses you. We basically all live in these societies, whether it's whatever country it is, it's too much to keep us from ever reaching outside of this box. So we have to climb out of this box. And it doesn't mean physically, it means mentally. And when you're a child, it's easier for you to do that because you're not trained yet, conditioned yet. As we get older, we get conditioned and we get sucked in more. As a kid, you just coming into the world, so you taking it all. You able to take it all in, not just this box, but the trees, the birds, the ant that everybody overlooks. You know, you a kid, you play with it, you figure it out, you start to study it. So that sparks your imagination. We lose that as we get older, and that's one of the reasons I'm trying to get back to like nature, like homeland. That's my goal. Like get back to the way we used to live. My whole goal is to go back to living like an Arawak. You know what I mean? This is not living. This ain't for us. This is definitely not for us.
100%. Yeah, because we are nature, you know, and that's one thing we forgot, but we are nature. We're part of nature. We're not, you know what I mean? So
and that opens the whole universe. Like when you look at it like that, we connected to everything. The bird that's flying, everything, the sky, the sun. So we're more than this. So that's, and as a kid, and if you remember one of those songs, right? Sky's the limit. Gotta keep driving. That's the messages we was living back then. It was different. That's one of the things I loved about being in the ghetto, being burnt down and having abandoned buildings everywhere. Yeah, it was hard, but for a kid, it was awesome because days that you was alone and you walk through a junkyard, you would find different things. And because you didn't have anything, you would grab a broken toy or something and start building it. Or you find wheel or something, and your mind would start to like, oh, look at this piece of wood. I'm gonna add this wheel, and the wheels be different sizes. You don't care. You put it together. You figure it out.
We use our imagination, because we have no. That's it. Yeah,
exactly. And that's one of the things that sometimes people think that money and all this stuff is great. It actually is not. It's a tool made to use. When you get comfortable, to me, you're not alive anymore. You're dead. You just living dead. You know what I mean? If you got everything there, and you don't have to go out and get your food and hustle. You know, I still hustle with my art. I don't have it made at all. You know, I'm hustling. You know what I mean? Like and I love it. I love it. I don't change my ways. I don't change it. I don't sell out to these other galleries. I stay with this one because I love the way they do business, the way they treated me these last 5 years, and I like the fairness and also the way they appreciate me, and also because they never had nothing like me ever. So I'm special and I feel special, but at the same time, they appreciate what I bring to the table. So you don't find that in business a lot. So I'd rather have that than being all over the place and making more money and having more stress and more issues. Nah, I'm old enough. Like, keep that. I don't want that. I need peace of mind.
That's wise, man, because, you know, a lot of people today are just going to wherever they can make the most money. And sometimes that's not the best for them. Or for the rest of the people. Yeah.
You have to go. My philosophy at 55 years old, you gotta go where you're happy and your soul is content and you have peace in your life. Because peace in your life right now, like for anybody, whether you watch some online, it's not easy to come by. It's very hard. And it becomes a luxury when you get older. Like after you live, especially if you lived a wild life. I lived a really wild life. I'm really lucky to be here. And when you get to this stage, if you don't learn to appreciate that, then something's wrong with you. You know what I mean? Like I count my blessings every day. I take care of myself. I don't take things for granted. I don't get high. I don't drink. I don't do none of that because I've been through that already a million times and I've seen a million people perish like that. So I look at myself saying, wow, why did I make it? You know, why? Yeah. So I take responsibilities, even with doing this. It's part of the responsibility of sharing that wisdom and knowledge just because I'm able to. You know what I mean? And so many can't. So, and it's important that it continues with all of us to continue this because there needs to be a balance. The young people can't constantly just hear one aspect that society is pushing. They need to also hear the part that we're talking about that's real, that's going to solve their issues. You know, it's going to help them get through the hard time, make them realize who they are and what their role is in life is bigger than buying a car or whatever. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate you so much, my brother.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.
I wanna kind of bring it full circle. Like you said, you've lived through a lot, man. You've been through a lot, and like I said, it's an honor to have you on the show. I would just love for you to as the great artist that you are today, you have been kind of recognized for your art and awarded and everything. I would like to know which one of your recognitions or awards has meant the most to you.
I would say, well, first of all, I would say what really started my career off, which I didn't realize I had a career in this. Mm-hmm. It was at a really low part of my life. And my brother's wife is a top designer. And she had picked up the Rachel Roy line in 2009. And she had this idea. It was way ahead of the time. This graph stuff wasn't nowhere near where it's at now when it crossing over. She had a vision, brought it to me innocently. It was just like input. And anyway, that would lead to Rachel Roy going crazy over it. It went from it being like me selling patterns to them being a collaboration, which landed in Macy's. And it was the first line like that ever. And it was everything from shoes to bags to clothing, you name it. But it landed me all 7 of Macy's windows I got to do, which is incredible to start off a career, to come back, especially when I wasn't looking for it. And to find out, that's when I found out that I had people knew who I was worldwide as a kid. Like I haven't been doing any art or anything or out there. I was in the music business for years and then I was in a lot of other stuff. And for that to come full circle was like, it was like a door opening, but that's a very special moment because what happened was everything that I did as a kid that was outlawed, that I was punished for, wanted posters, mother, flipping out for dirtying your clothes and beating you and all the stuff in the streets, all the jumpings and all the fights and all the stabbings and all the stuff we had to endure, to have this come full circle and give me a career at a time when I was being, going through a separation with my wife, my mother had just passed, things were just happening. My job was laying me off. Everything was just happening at that point. And then I get this phone call where I'm on a speakerphone with Rachel Roy and the team. And then from me leaving, a couple of weeks of leaving the job, I start now on this art thing. And then finding out through them, I had an international following of people that knew who I was, writers and people and other people that knew my history, and the crew's history blew me away. So I would say that's definitely the most important moment. Awards, I would say there's been many, but I would say the one, and it's only because it's been the most recent. Last year, I was given an award for the 50th anniversary by the People's Film Festival in Harlem. I did an IBM documentary called The Last Bomb about maybe 16, 17 years ago that I never really got to finish because of situations with internally. And I just had shelved it. But every time people saw it, they were like, yo, you got to release it. And I'm like, it's not even, the sound is not even edited right. They're like, it's dope like that. So I end up putting it on Vimeo, and I'll give you the link. And it tells that whole story from all of us.
We're gonna have the link down in the description so everybody can go check it out.
I'll send it to you today because it's actually really dope because it's all of us talking about these this whole how we came to be in IBM. But anyway, that I put it on Vimeo as an educational thing, cultural education thing, and then it got different people picked it up. That film festival being that it's in Harlem. Right. And it's people from our communities that put it together. Film festival. First year they showed it on their website, and then last year they premiered it in one of the small theaters, and they gave me an award and Grandmaster Caz and all these people were in the audience getting awards as well for the 50th anniversary. So I would say I didn't even do a speech because it was kind of like all I could do is thank the people around, and I couldn't even think of promoting the film because to me it was remarkable. It was freaking incredible, like to be on stage and getting this award, this trophy with my name on it, and you have all the pioneers, getting an award in Harlem. And I didn't even again, it's not something I even went after. It's just something that I got blessed with for a documentary that I totally funded, and it was just doing it because Pope kept going to jail, and I just wanted to tell our story at the time. So it wasn't even never made to make money or anything. It was just something that I poured myself into with another producer, Naima Holmes, and we was put it together. Now she's big in the film industry, but Anyway, I would say that one just to end it quick. But that was amazing. And in the Magic Johnson Theater, by the way, in Harlem, it was just, it was crazy. So I say that's the award.
Yeah, that's amazing. I appreciate that. All right, man. Before I let you go, I like to do this thing here at the Vital Hoops podcast. I ask the guests to recommend a book.
Oh man, am I limited to one book?
No. You can give me a couple. It's all good.
I'll be quick. Look, I actually have a stack.
Dope. Go ahead, man.
That literally, it's funny you said this. It was in my living room. I pulled it in here with me because it's sitting there. And I'll start it off with, first of all, I had just recently found this again. It was hard to find.
Wow.
But 1492, What It Means to Be Discovered, is etchings of our ancestors and what they went through when the Europeans came. Wow. So I recommend this, and it's sitting there. This is the stack the way it was. So I didn't have this for myself.
Yeah.
I gave all these books away, and I ended up having to order them again. They all came in. So
Fanon.
Yes, I recommend that highly. That's from my Panther years when I was in the Panthers. So is this.
Wow.
Seize the time. Got to throw the Assata in there.
Wow.
And
killing it.
And recently, you said it, wise, intelligent. I haven't got a chance to read it. He blessed me with this.
That's so dope.
About it, and and listen to it. It was what we talking about.
Yeah.
It's literally on this stack. I just got all these back. And real quick, this is a book I just found that I have a little piece in. This is during the gang days. It's called Bandana Republic. I don't know if it's still out there, but it just happened to be with the stack. But it does have like half a page of something at the time that I was, being talked about. And the last one was somebody special gifted me this on my birthday, which Basquiat.
Yeah, that's dope.
So it just happened to be that stack was there, and I was rushing in here. I said, let me just grab the stack. So
hey man, those are some amazing books. And hold on, man, you just slipped it in there real quick that you were a Panther.
Oh yeah, in the 90s. I'm right now titled, which is one of the highest honors in my life. I'm an adopted Panther Cub.
Wow.
So in the 90s, the Black Panthers, the originals, because mostly a lot around the political prisoners, Mumia and Matulu, all those cats, Seale, all of them that actually coming out now, passing away. Geronimo, rest in peace to all of them. And those became my teachers. So they created a newspaper committee again. And I was at a protest for the embargo of Cuba. I was taken by Chino from Familia, my gang, took me to this rally because I was coming out of the music business. I was kind of like lost in the sauce, but I had read Seize the Time on the road when I was on tour. And I didn't even know, I knew about the Panthers, but I knew them as a gang. Because they were gangsters with the drug dealers. So in Harlem, we knew them as, like here growing up, we knew them kind of like they were just, you didn't mess with them. But I didn't know to the extent, I come out of a big, powerful gang as well, like a mafia. So I was reading Seize the Time on the road, and it blew my mind. I was like, damn, we should have been doing this, right? So anyway, that fueled that. And then I went to a rally, and his brother had a shirt like, with this picture. It's funny. He had the same color shirt on. It was a sweatshirt, and he had this. And I seen it, and I had just read this for the first time. It was in an article from a magazine called Brothers and Sisters. I think BET people released it. It was like a conscious, like kind of like cultural hip hop magazine in a way, Brothers and Sisters, I think, or Sisters and Brothers, something like that. Anyway, I read an article about that. I went and got the book, and I was reading it, and it blew my mind. And then I see this brother at the rally. I kick it with him, and he tells me we have political education. The Panthers have political education at Toro College or something uptown. And he was like, "Why don't you come by this Sunday?" So when I go, they were like trying to formulate the Panther newspaper again, and they were looking for younger people to do it. So I get down with that, but the reward was they gave you, this is all original Panthers, original. They give you political education. You had to go through a year leadership training was called. But once you graduated from that, you was considered to be like a Panther because you knew everything. Not everybody made it. I'm one of the few people that actually completed it. But what happened was during that time of completion, the group that we was with, we was like, nah, man, forget about the newspaper. We got to vamp this up. So they created what became the Black Panther Collective, which is because a party in their ideology was a party is determined by the people. You don't name yourself a party. That's not the way it works. The people got to come to you as the vanguard. You can't say I'm the vanguard. The people got to choose you. So for us, it was the collective of new and older. So that was
Okay.
the concept. And what happens is we end up becoming so powerful in the city. That's when they had the Million Youth March and all that stuff, that we end up creating the Brutality Prevention Project, because Giuliani's cops were just killing cats and taking over streets. It was out of control. So anyway, long story short, we created a patrol, video camera patrols, which now became Cop Watch. Mm-hmm. We end up teaching Malcolm X grassroots. They end up taking that to Brooklyn. And then eventually, if you look up Cop Watch, it's one of the biggest organizations that monitor police conduct in the country. So we started, that's what our thing was. And we went through hell. The cops was like, I mean, got me a lot of heat. Like I was, so that's the story with that. But I had the privilege, again, my life put me in a position in which I even spoken to Assata on the phone. I don't know if I can say that here, but and that's how I met Deb Prez before they had a record. M1 and Stick, they were part of Uhuru. And I think also, I saw your shirt. I've messed with a lot of the cats.
Guerrilla Republic?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So you bring up Black Panther Collective, I think you, in your circles of anybody, they'll know about us in the 90s. We was no joke. And we had an office right by the Apollo Theater. Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I learned from everybody, man. Like, it was nuts.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to the Uhuru movement. Shout out to Guerrilla Republic. You know, Free Mumia. Still locked up, unfortunately.
Rebel Diaz. All those cats. What's
shout out to Deborah.
We could go on. Like, we have a nice circle of cats putting in the work.
For sure, my brother.
And the sisters.
For sure. And sisters. Yo, but I appreciate you, my brother. Please, before you go, can you, it's going to be down in the description anyway, but can you tell the listeners, where they can check you out, website, IG, whatever?
Mm-hmm. So I think the best one that's updated mostly is IG, and that'll be Sen1, SEN with the number 1, original, all one word. And then the website is SEN with the number 1.com, simple. And Facebook is just George Sen Morillo, my full name. Yep. So, yeah.
Hip-hop legend, Sen1. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for coming through the Vital Hoops podcast. I hope to have you again on the show, man. You got so much.
We'll keep building. We'll keep building.
Yeah, no doubt, without a doubt, man. I appreciate you, my brother.
I appreciate you too. And anything you need from me, just holler, okay?
Good looking, for sure. Peace.
All right, peace.
All right. Again, much respect and give thanks to the great brother, George Sen1 Morillo. Please share this. This is important. You know what I mean? The legend over here, breaking it down. So please like, share, subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Also follow the brother Sen1 on IG. Check out what he got going on. Check out the documentary. The link is down in the description. Shout out Guerrilla Republic once again. Go to guerrillarepublic.org. Shout out Guerrilla Republic Cuba. A link to our Facebook page is going to be down in the description as well. Go to VitalHoops.net. For the people, by the people, for the culture. Uhuru.